While Steve Rogers may be known as the original and most famous super soldier in Marvel Comics, but after the scientist that created Captain America was murdered soon after, Steve Rogers was artificially juiced up. The scientific research that went into creating the formula died along with him. Over the decades since World War II, there have been many different countries and attempts to replicate the super soldier serum, and as a result has given new life to some of the most famous artificially enhanced characters in comics. While the results may have varied and a great philosophical debate could be had about whether or not the artificial enhancement and powers that came along with it corrupted innocent souls, or if super soldier villains were villains to begin with, there have been a wide variety of characters in Marvel Comics classed as super soldiers. Here's a list of just 15 of the most notable characters who can be classed as super soldiers and a brief overview of their stories. Let's first start with Man-Thing. The year was 1971 and it saw the arrival of the swamp monster known as Man-Thing. Starting out life as Dr. Theodore Ted Sallis, a scientist working for S.H.I.E.L.D. in the Everglades to create a new version of the super soldier serum. When the base was attacked by the terrorist organization known as AIM, Sallis attempted to get rid of his super soldier serum in the only way he knew how, by injecting it into himself, because, that's smart. However, while injecting himself and escaping AIM, Sallis became distracted and crashed his car into the swamp. With a combination of swamp water and super soldier serum, Dr. Theodore Sallis emerged from the marsh as the Man-Thing. Not quite DC Swamp Thing, but for those that don't know the character, think of that type of monstrous character. While there are positive and negative outcomes with experimentation, Man-Thing could easily be classed as an abomination as far as super soldiers are concerned. Not only is Man-Thing the furthest thing from a perfect human, which S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to recreate after Captain America, the resulting mutation simply created a zombified monster who feared fire and has only recently regained some of the intellect Sallis had as a scientist. Next on the list, Ante Cap. You create one perfect super soldier, and there's always those that attempt to mimic or tarnish their good name. Ante Cap first appeared in 2004 when an apparent series of brutal attacks were carried out and publicized as Captain America supposedly went rogue. However, it later transpired that this was an imposter who was dubbed Ante Cap by the military, who dedicated resources to apprehending the criminal. While Ante Cap doesn't have much of a backstory or even longevity with Marvel Comics, the unnamed imposter chose to tarnish Captain America's good name due to his girlfriend being murdered during the Oklahoma City bombing. After this, he sought to fight terrorism by joining the Navy, but being publicly denied due to being deemed mentally unstable. However, secretly being recruited to Protocol 6, who attempted to recreate the super soldier serum. Ante Cap was injected with a spinal implant and regular doses of super steroid, which gave him his enhanced physiology, but also deteriorated his mentality. While Ante Cap became an anti-hero, as being both an enemy and ally to the real Captain America, he eventually killed himself rather than being captured, and has since been lost in the pages of Marvel Comics due to anyone who isn't a diehard Cap fan. Next on the list, Masterman. So while Masterman is a mantle with multiple users in Marvel Comics, this list will focus on the original individual to take on the little Wilhelm Lohmer. In 1974, Lohmer was created as a Nazi sympathizer who submitted himself to being a guinea pig for scientific research in an attempt to recreate the super soldier serum. The serum artificially enhanced his senses to make him more powerful than Captain America, and he took on the mantle of Masterman. For all intents and purposes, Masterman is the Nazi version of Captain America. Think of him as the Marvel equivalent of Red Sun Superman, as he is a what if Captain America was created by the Nazis kind of situation thing. However, despite being Hitler's literal definition of the perfect human, Lohmer eventually grew old and regretful for his past and was able to redeem himself by saving the mutant Cable's life, learning that it takes more than physical enhancement to become Captain America. Up next, the Destroyer. So before there was Captain America, there was the Destroyer, debuting in 1941. 2 years before the Cap was ever created, Kevin Marlowe was an investigative journalist reporting on the Nazis from the Lion's Den. Being caught and captured, he became a recipient of the super soldier serum from a scientist he was locked up with and decided to become the Nazi hunter known as the Destroyer. Now, while the Destroyer dedicated his life as European hero to murdering all of his Nazi enemies, unlike the scrupulous, moralistic hero that is Captain America, Marlowe continued killing into his later years, which still not only made him a hero, but also a legend. It's just a question as to whether or not the destroyer should be idolized or not. Up next on the list, Nomad. An interesting entry, and one that came full circle in the end. Nomad was first introduced in 1972 as a way of retconning some continuity errors made in comics at the time regarding Captain America's timeline. Well, Nomad was originally known as Jack Monroe, part of a duo who became the new Captain America and Bucky, with the scientists who attempted to recreate the super soldier serum, becoming a mentally unstable Captain America, and Monroe taking on the mantle of sidekick Bucky. Now, Monroe became the superhero Nomad, while also becoming the real Captain America's new sidekick down the line after Rogers quit. Later in continuity, Monroe becomes the new Scourge of the underworld, before ultimately being murdered by the Winter Soldier, aka Bucky Barnes. See what we mean by a full circle story? Yeah. Up next, Mockingbird. So, Barbara Bobby Morse was a brilliant scientist in peak physical condition, a winning and rare combination that caught the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., who made her an agent in both the field and in the lab. Originally a simple sidekick to the savage Lander Khazar, Bobby eventually became a costume vigilante hero in her own right under the codename Mockingbird. Now, while Mockingbird isn't best known as a hero with powers, potentially due to the only mainstream version of the character on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., portrayed by Adrian Palicki, not displaying any sort of superpower whatsoever, she did eventually acquire powers in a life or death situation with the combined efforts of the Nazi version of the super soldier serum and the Infinity Serum that is credited as slowing down Nick Fury's age. Mockingbird became a stronger and better fighter with artificially enhanced senses as well as a rapid healing factor. Up next, Warhawk. Alrighty, so another example of the dark turn Captain America could have taken. Warhawk. Yep, he was first introduced in 1975 as a psychotic Vietnam soldier, Mitchell Tanner, who was living a settled life before being gunned down by U.S. soldiers. Now, this led to him being revived by an experimental super soldier serum which altered his physiology and appearance as well as making him invulnerable. Becoming the trained assassin Warhawk, Tanner was eventually driven to insanity by the trauma and deaths he carried out. Although becoming a mainstay enemy of the legendary Iron Fist, Tanner also frequently got on the wrong side of the X-Men, albeit teaming up with Wolverine from time to time. Now, Warhawk's invulnerability allows him to shrug off bullets as well as be resistant to Wolverine's adamantium claws and even the fallout from a punch by the legendary Iron Fist. Combining these new talents with the skills he already has as a soldier and assassin has made Tanner a deadly enemy and even more a deadlier super soldier. Up next, Nuke. So Frank Simpson originally was introduced as simply a crazed Vietnam veteran for hire with the American flag tattooed on his face. The soldier was hired by the Kingpin to kill Daredevil before also crossing paths with Captain America. Now, Nuke used a specialized firearm that fired both bullets and missiles while also keeping score of his kill count. To add to his twisted senses, Nuke would continuously reset the kill counter as a way of trying to beat a score. And Nuke's origins were eventually revealed as being abducted by the mutant Wolverine, who carved the American flag in his face and forced him to become part of the Weapon Plus program, which enhanced his body and equipped him with cybernetic parts. Not quite a traditional super soldier, but moreover a cohered super soldier. Up next, U.S. Agent. This one's a little interesting. You see, John F. Walker was a patriotic young man who joined the Army with a desire to become an American hero. However, Walker missed the opportunity to prove himself as the Vietnam War had been and gone when he enlisted. Fortunately for him, though, Walker turned to the Power Broker, who specialized in dealing out superpowers and used a variation of the super soldier serum to turn Walker into the U.S. Agent, who declared himself as the most patriotic hero to ever live, dubbing himself the Super Patriot. Now, despite being recruited as the new Captain America in service of the government after Steve Rogers quit, his tenure as America's hero was soon met with controversy due to Walker's somewhat warped sense of patriotism. I mean, Rogers later claimed back his title as Captain America, and Walker then became the U.S. Agent. However, after being injured, he became the warden of the prison vessel known as the Raft, but later became a Black Ops soldier who would later cross paths with Sam Wilson, the current Captain America. Up next, Isaiah Bradley. So, to anyone who has ever wondered, what if Captain America was black? The answer lies between the pages of a 2003 miniseries in the form of Isaiah Bradley. Now, in this miniseries, Bradley was a soldier in World War II who, along with all the black soldiers of the time, was subjected to the mandatory super soldier serum program. The experiment was carried out prior to Steve Rogers' transformation and proved mostly a failure, with the majority of the black regiment dying from the process while the survivors were left mutated. Now, being a survivor subject, the newly enhanced Bradley stole the Captain America suit and proceeded to destroy the Nazi super soldier program. Despite going down in history as an urban legend, Bradley was court-martialed for his efforts. Bradley would later become the grandfather to Young Avengers member Patriot, who artificially enhanced himself to carry out his grandfather's legacy. Up next, Black Widow. So while there are many subjects in the Black Widow program, Natalia Romanova, later better known as Natasha Romanoff, is the most notable, starting off life in Marvel as a KGB assassin and enemy of Iron Man. Now, being revealed as Black Widow, a Soviet Union agent who was trained from a young age to become the world's finest sleeper agent, her training involved an injection of the experimental super soldier serum that enhanced her senses and delayed her aging process. After a while, Romanoff defected to the US, where she joined S.H.I.E.L.D., becoming one of their top agents, as well as a member of the Avengers, utilizing her trained and artificially given skills to stand alongside gods, superhumans, and mutants alike. Up next, let's look at Luke Cage. The year 1972, and Luke Cage was introduced as the wrongfully arrested Carl Lucas, who agreed to subject himself to an experimental variation of the, you guessed it, super soldier serum, walking away from the experiment more enhanced than Captain America due to now having impenetrable skin. Carl Lucas became Luke Cage and left prison, becoming a hero for hire. Originally becoming a black stereotype, Luke Cage had evolved over the years into one of Marvel's best beloved superheroes. Not only has he been a member of both the Avengers and the Defenders, but he also famously teamed up with super soldier Captain America, superhuman Spider-Man, and the mystical Iron Fist. Fun fact, Cage is also one half of one of Marvel's comics' most notable power couples, as he is married to fellow enhanced superhero Jessica Jones, with whom he now has a child with. It's now time we look at Omega Red. Now, he may not be known to mainstream audiences, but Omega Red is a force to be reckoned with in the X-Men Rogues Gallery. You see, the mutant named Arkady Rosevich was a Russian serial killer turned KGB living weapon after the Soviet Union conducted their own super soldier program. Omega Red was granted superhuman senses and implanted with carbonadium tentacles that had the added effect of slowing down the healing process in other mutants. Eventually being deemed too unpredictable, Omega Red was eventually put on ice by the Soviet Union to be released in the modern era to wreak havoc on the New World, as well as crossing paths with the like of enemy Wolverine. Second to last on the list, Red Skull. This is Captain